Yeah, I mean, I think like following the game, it's so disappointing to lose. And most seasons end on a loss, so it's really hard and challenging, but
What happens on court is only a fraction of reality, a clean, polished stage hiding the chaos boiling beneath professional basketball. Beneath elite skill and highlight moments in the WNBA, a quiet tension continues rising, an unspoken code being aggressively reshaped in real time with every hard-fought game, as traditional standards of conduct are stripped away and replaced by a far more ruthless, unapologetic edge. In this environment, it takes just one controversial flashpoint to place a lasting target on a superstar, turning every future appearance into a ticking time bomb ready to explode and raising the question of who is bold enough to trigger it. The situation erupted from a single play that sent shockwaves across the league, a brutal collision that didn't just divide fans and analysts but also drew sharp lines between players, setting up a deeply personal clash that felt shocking in the moment, yet inevitable in hindsight. At the center stood Breanna Stewart, a two-time MVP and one of the most dominant physical forces the game has seen, who during an intense battle against the Phoenix Mercury delivered what many called a crushing, season-shifting screen on Sophie Cunningham, a moment that instantly split opinion. To supporters of old-school physical basketball, it was simply a legal, hard-nosed play that reflected the toughness required to win at the highest level, a true championship mentality. But to a loud and growing opposition, it crossed into something far more troubling, pushing beyond a line many believe should never be crossed. What many witnessed was not a routine basketball play, but what they saw as an illegal moving screen, a blindside collision that felt less like strategy and more like calculated aggression aimed at eliminating a key opponent. The aftermath hit instantly and undeniably, leaving Sophie Cunningham on the floor in visible pain and forcing her out of the game. From there, the controversy erupted, spreading across social media, dominating sports debates, and fueling tense conversations behind closed locker room doors. Suddenly, the league was confronted with a bigger question than one isolated play. Was this becoming the new reality of the WNBA, and had the fragile boundary between tough competition and outright dirty play finally been erased? The incident more than sidelined a key contributor for the Mercury. It sent a loud and unmistakable warning throughout the league. Every franchise received the same message. If you stepped onto the court against Breanna Stewart and the loaded New York Liberty, you had to be ready for a full-scale battle, because they were operating with a level of physical intensity that many teams were still struggling to match. That single controversial and endlessly dissected screen quickly became more than just a moment in one game. It turned into the spark that ignited everything that followed, setting a standard across the league that players began studying closely. Yet the incident was never truly isolated. It reflected a deeper transformation taking shape inside the WNBA. The league was undergoing a major cultural shift, fueled by a new wave of elite talent and unprecedented media attention. With that rise came sharper intensity, heavier expectations, and pressure that made every possession feel massive. Regular season matchups now carried playoff-level urgency, and a more physical, unapologetic style of play started defining the game. Players weren't just competing for wins anymore. They were battling for respect, space, and reputation. Inside locker rooms, loyalty hardened into something almost tribal, especially among younger rosters embracing an us-against-the-world mentality. In this new atmosphere, seeing a franchise star, especially the young faces drawing millions of new fans, get challenged or pushed around became unacceptable. A new form of on-court accountability began to emerge, where any hit on a team's leader demanded an immediate response, a message sent back with equal force. This era of player policing meant every hard foul, aggressive screen, and post-whistle confrontation was carefully watched, mentally stored, and never forgotten. Across the league, a silent ledger of grievances grew, with players waiting for the right moment to settle old scores. The Stewart-Cunningham collision only added fuel to a fire that was already burning intensely. This moment confirmed what many players had already sensed. The game was changing at its core, and anyone unwilling to embrace the rising physicality risked being left behind or getting hurt. The atmosphere had become tense enough to create space for a new kind of enforcer, a player whose value could not be measured only by points or assists, but by their readiness to stand firm, protect their teammates, and handle the hardest responsibilities without hesitation. That is where Lexie Hull entered the picture as the overlooked protector of the Indiana Fever. On a roster pushed into the national spotlight, surrounded by emerging stars like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, Hull was never the one dominating headlines or highlight reels. She was the grit behind the glamour, the connective force holding everything together. Her game was built on relentless defense, tireless hustle, and a willingness to take on the thankless roles that often decide championships. Her identity came from effort, and her reputation was shaped by a quiet but undeniable toughness. Throughout her career, Hull had established herself as someone who refused to back down, regardless of the opponent or the magnitude of the stage. She understood the unwritten rules of competition, the psychology of intimidation and respect, better than most. While attention stayed fixed on the stars, Hull was studying in the film room, breaking down tendencies, preparing mentally for the kind of physical battles that statistics could never fully capture. Like everyone else, she had watched what happened to Sophie Cunningham, listened to every argument, and reviewed the footage from every possible angle. As one of the key defenders for a young, electrifying Indiana squad that had quickly become a target for opponents playing with unusual aggression, Lexie Hull understood it was only a matter of time before her own team faced the same harsh reality. She saw herself as the protector, the first line of defense for the franchise's future, and had no intention of letting her teammates become the next warning sign in the league's increasingly physical landscape. That mindset made the upcoming matchup between the Indiana Fever and the New York Liberty feel far bigger than an ordinary regular season contest. The arena carried a rare intensity, because this was never just another game. It was a true test of resolve and a defining benchmark for the young Fever roster. All eyes were locked on how this rising, relentless group would respond to the championship-caliber powerhouse from New York. Yet beneath that broader storyline lingered a more personal question that shaped the night. How would Indiana, and specifically its defenders, handle the physical dominance of Breanna Stewart? Would they allow her to dictate the tone with aggressive screens and forceful drives, or would they stand firm and challenge that authority head-on? The question hanging over the night was simple. Would someone finally rise to challenge the league's most dominant force and draw a line that couldn't be crossed? For Lexie Hull, that responsibility was clear. She had been assigned as one of the primary defenders against Breanna Stewart, a role demanding strength, focus, and resilience. The memory of what happened to Sophie Cunningham stayed present, a reminder of the risk that comes with confronting a player of Stewart's power and intensity. From the opening tip, the game carried an edge that couldn't be ignored. Every possession felt like a battle. Every inch of space had to be earned. Then came the moment many expected. In a critical sequence, Breanna Stewart attacked with her trademark force, isolating her defender and driving with intent. Standing in her path was Lexie Hull, firmly set and fully prepared. What followed was a heavy collision, bodies crashing as both players fought for position and control. It was the kind of physical exchange that defines elite competition, but this one felt heavier. When the referee's whistle sounded, Hull didn't simply reset. Instead, she held her ground, stepped forward, and closed the space with complete confidence. Then came the stare, cold, steady, and unshaken. It carried a message without words. What followed was a tense exchange, a confrontation the cameras captured clearly even if the microphones couldn't fully translate it. What unfolded was not a spontaneous reaction to a single foul in the heat of competition. It was a deliberate and unmistakable response to everything that had come before, the incident involving Sophie Cunningham. In that moment, Lexie Hull became the voice of her team and a symbol for players across the league, delivering a message without needing to say a word. This would not happen again, not to Indiana, and not without resistance. Her anger was controlled and purposeful, not reckless, and that made it even more powerful. It was the fierce, protective resolve of someone determined to make it clear that the Indiana Fever would not be bullied, intimidated, or broken. That single stare-down accomplished far more than interrupting a play. It altered the emotional and psychological balance of the game. For the young Fever roster, it became a statement of identity. They may have lacked experience, but they refused to be seen as weak. The confrontation sent a visible shock through both benches and into the crowd. Stewart, now fully aware that she was facing a defender unwilling to retreat and prepared to match every ounce of physicality, had to adjust her approach moving forward. Meanwhile, the Fever players drew confidence from watching Hull stand up for them so publicly, and their energy shifted with renewed swagger, belief, and collective toughness. This is how true rivalries are built in the modern WNBA, not through headlines or manufactured storylines, but through raw and defining moments of on-court conflict. They are forged in hard fouls, heated exchanges, and the silent challenges that pass between competitors. Hull's confrontation with Stewart was never just about one game. It was about building a new identity for herself and her team, one rooted in resilience and earned respect, the kind never given, only taken through action. In that moment, the Fever showed the rest of the league they were more than a group of talented players. They were a unified force, a family bound by loyalty. Anyone targeting one of them would have to answer to all of them. These are the defining moments that shape the future of the league, creating unforgettable drama that keeps fans invested long after the final buzzer. The clash between Hull and Stewart became a clear example of the WNBA's rapid transformation, a league increasingly shaped by personal rivalries that feel authentic, intense, and impossible to ignore. That energy is visible everywhere, from the long-building tension between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark that first ignited on the college championship stage, to the now infamous fall by Chindi Carter that sparked national debate. The league is filled with fierce competitive drama, driven by a generation of players who embrace their identities, carry chips on their shoulders, and remain deeply loyal to their teammates. They understand that with more attention on the WNBA than ever before, every game is a national stage, and every performance a chance to make a statement. The rising physicality is not empty theatrics. It has become a strategic and psychological weapon in the modern game. It is about seizing control of the mental battle, disrupting an opponent's rhythm, and setting a tone of authority from the very first possession. This is the reality of the modern WNBA, a league where elite skill and generational talent are matched by relentless heart and uncompromising toughness. The era of quiet, uncontested basketball has faded, replaced by a high-stakes struggle for dominance that is as demanding as it is thrilling. The bigger question, though, is what this evolution means for the future of the sport. This more intense, physical, and confrontational style has undeniably captured public attention in ways the league has never seen before. Attendance has surged, television audiences have reached historic levels, and the WNBA is finally receiving the cultural recognition it has long pursued. Rivalries, emotional intensity, and dramatic storylines have become central to that appeal. Yet with that momentum comes a difficult question. How far is too far? The league now faces the challenge of preserving its aggressive, compelling identity while protecting athletes from unnecessary harm and maintaining the spirit of sportsmanship at its core. There is a razor-thin line between playing hard and playing recklessly, between psychological warfare and dangerous excess. As the WNBA continues its rapid rise, managing that balance may become its greatest test. The confrontation between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart was never just a passing outburst. It was a revealing glimpse into a league in transition, a sign of what lies ahead, and a reminder that the next defining moment may be closer than anyone expects. What unfolds on the court is only part of reality, a polished surface masking the turbulence underneath professional basketball. Beneath elite talent and highlight plays in the WNBA, a growing tension is forming, an unspoken code being rewritten in real time as older standards of conduct give way to a sharper, more aggressive identity. In this environment, a single controversial moment can put a lasting target on a superstar, turning every future appearance into a pressure-filled collision waiting for the smallest spark. The question becomes unavoidable. In a league this competitive, who is willing to be the one to ignite that fire? It all began with a play that sent shockwaves across the league, a physical collision that divided fans and analysts while also deepening player tensions, setting up a confrontation that felt shocking in the moment, but inevitable in hindsight. At the center stood Breanna Stewart, a two-time MVP and one of the most dominant forces the game has seen, who during a heated matchup against the Phoenix Mercury delivered what many called a game-altering screen on Sophie Cunningham. To some, it was simply hard-nosed, legal basketball, a display of championship-level physicality rooted in old-school toughness. To others, it crossed a clear line, seen as a blindside-style collision that felt less like a basketball play and more like excessive aggression that left Cunningham on the floor injured and forced her out of the game. The reaction was immediate and explosive, spreading across social media, sports shows, and locker rooms nationwide, fueling debate over whether this moment signaled a new, more physical standard for the WNBA. In that moment, the blurry line between hard-nosed competition and outright dirty play hardened into something permanent. The incident didn't just remove a key contributor from the floor for the Mercury. It became a league-wide wake-up call, a warning shot that echoed through every locker room in the WNBA. The message felt unmistakable. When you step onto the court against Breanna Stewart and the star-driven New York Liberty, you are not just facing a basketball team. You are stepping into a physical, high-pressure environment where every possession can feel like a collision course. For many teams, it forced a mental reset, a recognition that the margin for hesitation had disappeared. That single, endlessly replayed screen quickly grew beyond a controversial highlight. It became a reference point, something players, coaches, and analysts dissected frame by frame, trying to understand not just what happened, but what it meant for the direction of the league. In film sessions and locker room conversations, it was no longer just about one possession. It was about how the game itself was evolving. And in that evolution, physicality was no longer an occasional tactic, it was becoming a defining language. But none of this existed in isolation. It was part of a broader transformation inside the WNBA, a league surging into a new era shaped by rising stars, unprecedented media coverage, and a level of visibility that amplified every moment on the floor. With that attention came constant pressure, where even regular season matchups carried the emotional weight of postseason battles. Every drive, screen, and rebound felt magnified under the spotlight, and that intensity naturally bled into how the game was played. As the stakes rose, so did the edge. A more physical, unapologetic style of basketball began to take hold, not as an exception, but as an expectation. Players weren't just competing for wins anymore. They were fighting for identity, respect, and space in a rapidly evolving hierarchy. Inside teams, loyalty became something deeper and more instinctive, almost tribal, especially among younger rosters built around emerging stars drawing new audiences to the league. Protecting those stars was no longer a courtesy. It was a responsibility carrying real emotional weight. Within this environment, any hard foul or aggressive action against a team's leader demanded an immediate response. Silence was no longer an option, and the reply had to be delivered clearly, forcefully, and without hesitation. That unspoken expectation added a new layer of tension where every collision, screen, and post-whistle exchange became more than just part of the game. It turned into part of a growing memory of league-wide grievances. Nothing was ever truly forgotten, even when it wasn't spoken about in the moment. The controversy surrounding the Stewart-Cunningham incident didn't just add to that tension, it escalated it. It poured fuel onto an already volatile fire, pushing the league deeper into an era where emotion, physicality, and rivalry were no longer separate elements of basketball, but tightly connected forces shaping every single possession on the floor. If you're following these storylines closely, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more breakdowns like this.